Hey, what's going on there, folks? It's Kurt here. This is just another DIY video. If you're clicking on this for a 2013 Ford Explorer or just how to learn maybe on any basic SUV to do your brakes, great. Consider subscribing. I appreciate all you returning viewers for watching. And this video, I'm going to cut right to the chase and get right into it. I'm not going to obviously take the tire off and show you how to do that. If you're going to be working on a vehicle, I hope you know how to take the tire off and jack the car up safely and get it underneath the structural part of the car where it should be. Anyway, I will spin around and we'll get started. Okay, moving on here, I want to talk a little bit about this and the situation of these brakes. If you can look here, there's actually a really good groove inside the rotor. So these brakes have actually went down to where they're actually to the point where they're grinding. So it's past a little, there's actually a little squeak wear indicators that are on the pads. If you look, the pad, I'll see if I can actually find a way to really look in there. Well, looking at the pad here, it's basically to the point where the material on the pad is actually worn down, and now the pad's actually on the rivets or the actual metal part of the backing. So he caught it, just in time. This does happen occasionally, especially if the little wear indicators break off. So moving on here, well, I'm not going to show you every single point because I could basically show you what I'm doing, but I'm actually going to specifically tell you what the sizes are, tell you what you need to do. You're not going to see me do it because there's no point in you watching me as long as you know what you got to do. So simple enough. We've got you want to start with your caliper bolts. So right here, point at that. And I'll try to back up here, even though I got a shadow. Actually, let me see if I can, let me get the light on the camera here. There we go. Okay, so we've got a top caliper bolt, and we also got a bottom caliper bolt right here. And first thing we want to do is loosen them. They're actually 13 millimeters. So loosen them, and you're going to want to take a little screwdriver. We can actually pry the caliper out of there. Sometimes it takes a little work to get them out of there. And these also, I will mention in the next step, they're actually, there's an e-brake on this caliper. So most of them, I'm not really familiar with Ford, but I'm assuming, I get the kit out here, but I'm assuming they're going to actually have to spin in and not just going to get pressed in, but we will find that out and you'll see that in the next step. So let's get that off and then we'll move on to getting the caliper bracket off. Okay, folks, so moving on here, I got the two 13 millimeter bolts. If you're doing this job, I'm hopefully you get your two 13 millimeter bolts and got your caliper off there. So the next step, a big crucial part of this, and there's a couple other things I'm going to explain and talking about doing it right. So you want to check, there's actually these pins right here, and these are actually, there's actually lubrication inside these, and they're actually, the rubber boot on there protects them from the elements and it keeps the grease inside of them. So you want to make sure them are freed up. If they're not freed up, it can turn into a couple different problems. This vehicle, it is, so we're lucky. Sometimes you can get them out, you can heat them, it's a pain. And then there's other times it's just easy enough to just go buy a caliper at your local parts store. But these are free on this, and these are really free. I will still take them out, and you just put a little bit of brake grease on the insides of them, and just kind of so they keep moving and working the way they're supposed to. There's what I was talking about with the pads being metal to metal. There's no pad material left there. They did wear even. Well, I will also talk about when we move on to getting this bracket off, I will show you how these pads, they're actually stuck and they will not move, and that's a big part of this brake service and doing it right and not just slapping a set of pads on it. So anyway, this tool you're looking at now, this kit actually comes from Harbor Freight. It's just a disc brake pad caliper service kit, MF11-1. Very simple. I think it was like 30 bucks. With this type of caliper where you have the e-brake mechanism inside the caliper, you have to have some kind of a tool. You can't just push this piston in or you can damage it. A lot of people don't know that. And this piston is actually threaded inside there, so when the e-brake lever cranks, when the cable pulls it, it actually works and actually pushes that out. When it's turned, the threads actually push that out. So anyway, there's that tool, and if you get the tool, it's pretty simple. This little plate here, you just got to find an adapter that goes and lines up with these little pins on the piston. And I'm not going to do it on camera, but you just spin this until the caliper is all the way in. So let me get that spun in, and we'll move on to getting this bracket off, which is pretty simple, and then getting the rotor off. And I'll show you the most crucial parts with cleaning everything up so they work the way they're supposed to, and they're basically like when the car came from the factory. All right, folks, so there we are with the caliper. The piston is all pressed in as far as it seemed to go, so I will obviously definitely check when the brake pads go in there and make sure they fit, and it should be sufficient, and there's nothing abnormal or something wrong with the caliper. So we'll move on here, and the next step we're going to want to do here is we got these two 15mm bolts on the back of the brake caliper. We'll go ahead and we'll remove that, and I'll get started on the next step. Okay, moving on here. So I'm assuming you got the caliper bracket off, and you're probably going to have the same case, especially if you're in the rust belt. I've got the little tripod set up here so I can kind of show you, and I got the camera sitting there. So the pads are left over inside this, and what happens is these are actually slide points on here, this and that side, and these should actually that's another thing I should mention. If you get these from a parts store, you want to try to get the brake clips included, or little tiny chrome pieces here. I don't know if a customer supplied that or not, but either way we can clean these up and make them work because they are stainless steel. But these pads will not move. They are stuck in there, and this is crucial to brake performance. While the hydraulic pressure of the vehicle has enough pressure to push these in, my fingers can barely even push these in, and they're just in rough shape and they don't move. They should slide nice and freely, and this is just what happens when things get rusty. So even year to year, you should have your brakes can get rusty like this. So I'll show you a little bit of what it's going to take for force as far as getting these out of there. One of them did actually move, and I pushed my finger in there, but you shouldn't have to do that to get them out of there. So if you're just doing a brake job somewhere, and as you can see, there's no pad material left there, it's just metal. So now you can see it without the brake pads in there. We're going to want to take these clips out, and we're actually going to clean these surfaces. And when you put the new clips in, it'll have a nice clean surface. All the rust will be gone, and this won't be built up to where it's putting pressure on the pads to where it can't move. So I'll move on, and I'll show you what I'm done, what I did from here, because I'm not going to actually run the. You can use a few different things. You can use a file. I've actually got a little angle air powered tool. It's got a little tiny sandpaper disc on the other end of it. It's pretty convenient because it's air powered. And you can even use like a grinder, a regular, if you're careful with it. But I'll show you how these are cleaned up and what it's going to look like next. And again, I already mentioned these, but these are free, and that's good. And if these aren't free too, it can also cause one pad to wear prematurely. It can actually wear out within a month. I've seen it happen before when something seized up and somebody just slapped them in there. So I will show you. I don't know how easy this is going to go, so I'm going to try to get the rotor off here. It's usually a good smack of the hammer. It is rusty. This is Ford. Some of them actually have, some of the newer vehicles have a screw. This one doesn't have it in there. Whoever did it didn't put it back there. It's not crucial. They come from the factory to hold the rotor on. So you want to make sure you remove your screw. It might be a Torx or something like that before you go pounding the rotor off. So let's see if the rotor is actually going to come off. So luckily, I didn't have to have my heart beating a million times a minute. It came off really easy. And if you look at the rotor, it was definitely time for rotors. This rotor's shot. It's really rusty. The pad was running all over that rust. They were grinding, making some nasty noises, and the stopping power was probably cut about into half, even though while the rear brakes don't do a lot of the work, it was definitely cut into half. Okay, so moving on here now, we got that off there. So the hub here, especially if you got somewhat of a newer vehicle and you want everything nice and smooth when you're on the highway, you want to take some kind of an angle grinder with a whizzy pad on there, sandpaper pad, and you want to just clean all this up so there's no real, you can even take sandpaper, just get the rough rust off there so it's even. It's just like a tire balance. You want everything nice and smooth, so when you're going down the road you don't have rust built up here and then it's low on this section and everything's going to wobble. It's just not good. So we'll get everything cleaned up, and I'll show you kind of what I did and what you're going to want to do. All right there, folks, moving on again here. This surface is all cleaned. I put some brake grease on there, so the next person, whether it's me or somebody else that goes to get this rotor off there, it's not going to be all built up with rust. It also won't build up as quick with rust and cause vibrations or anything like that. So that's all set. Just the whizzy wheel on this part here. Clean that all up, and I do have a special tool. It's not crucial, but this actually goes around the wheel studs, and you just put them on there and go like that, and that gets the rust off nice and tight up against the wheel studs. You can also take a piece of sandpaper and go around the inner surface of the hub here, and that cleans that up, so the rotor also won't be, the rust won't be built up inside of here. So that's that. easy enough. These rotors do come with a little bit of oil on there. I just take a little bit of brake clean, spray it, wipe it off, so the brake pads aren't all covered in oil. So slap that on there. I usually push it up tight, spin it, make sure there's nothing rubbing, make sure the backing plate doesn't have built up rust. So it saves you the hassle of having to pull the tire back off and having a customer return for a noise or something like that. Moving on here, I'm going to peek in the camera, make sure here I got in view. So these surfaces, these are the old clips. The customer did buy the good pads, and it did come with the clips. I think he's learned numerous times that he knows to buy the better stuff. So I'm kind of happy for that. There's the old one. Surface on the bottom, surface on the top, surface on the other side here on the lower part, or the be like where there's an L, and the other side where there's an L here on this side. You're gonna want to clean all that up. And same on the bottom. And so that's that. And then again, I'll get into these, so I'll actually pop one off and show you what I did. I'll try to pop one of them off. So there's the grease. Oh, where are we here? Yep. So there's the, yeah, I'm looking at the wrong side of the camera. There's the pin all greased up, and it just slides back inside there in the rubber boot. And there was a little bit of rust built up. So there's that, nice and free. They were pretty free to begin with. And of course, that's crucial to doing your brakes the right way and to prevent premature wear. So anyway, moving on here, I'll basically get these slide points, or this where I clean these slide points up. We're going to get the grease, and we're going to put grease on here, and we're going to slap the clips on, and we'll go from there. Okay, folks, moving on there. This is one of the crucial parts like I was talking about. So after you got that all cleaned up, you're going to want to put your clips back on there. And as you can see, I've got my clips in there, and I'll zoom in there, and you can see that I do have brake grease on there. It is good to use brake grease because it can withstand heat. Even though you put grease on these, you want to put grease down before you put these on and grease on them after. As you can see, the grease does go away in time. So if you are worried about your brakes and you want to make them last for a while, you can have a brake service done every year, and your brakes, this vehicle actually, they wore pretty good. Your brakes will last longer. So anyway, this is how the pad should actually move in there. So you should be able to, well, I actually slipped the pad out of there, and I gotta put it back in on the other side. So the pad should move nice and freely like that, and that's the way they should move. So your piston, your hydraulic pressure forces that on there, and they work the way they're supposed to. So I'm going to move on, and we're going to slap this back on there with the 15mm bolts, and I'm going to put the pads on there once it's on there with the rotor, and we're going to put the caliper on and make sure the caliper is pressed in enough for it to fit. And I'll just kind of talk a little bit more on torquing them and just checking your work and making sure everything's right so the vehicle's safe for you or whoever's driving the vehicle. All right, folks, again, moving on here. I've got the bracket on. As you can see, I've got the pad slid in there. I also have the caliper on there. It slid on there nice, so it was pressed in enough. The pads are in there the way they're supposed to be, and everything's moving freely the way it should be, and everything is torqued. Well, you can look up the torque specs. I'm not really sure on this vehicle what they are. I could look them up online. I have 15 years experience, so I have a really good feel for how to tighten things and how they should be. I've even actually had a torque wrench break on me and finished up a vehicle about the last 4 or 5 head bolts, and I guessed, and it was fine, and years down the road it was fine. So I don't really worry about that. I get a real good feel for that kind of stuff, and I know what over tight is. I know when a brake's going to snap, and I know when they stretch, and that is that. So anyway, check, make sure your two 15mm bracket bolts are tightened and torqued, and then your two 13mm, if it's a Ford, it could be different on various vehicles, and then your two 13mm here and here on your caliper. So that's basically that, and I'm not going to film the other side, whereas obviously it's just repeat everything on this side, but the opposite side. And I also want to mention I do have a jack stand underneath this vehicle, so it is safe. So I will go ahead and I will actually get the tire on the side. And thanks for watching. And I'm going to wrap this up for today. Consider subscribing. Okay, so I didn't expect to do this one. I'm going to actually add this to the video. So this side here on the passenger side, I wasn't even going to film it. I wanted to show you what actually can happen when these are seized. So what happened is the pin that was inside of this here was seized in there. So when I tried to remove it, you can actually see it broke off. So the pin, the other half of the pin is actually seized inside this, where it's a lot more rustier on this side. The bottom one was still free. And there's no way I'm going to get that pin out of there because it's rusted in there. It'd take probably, I don't know what it'd take drilling it out, tons of time, tons of money to get it out of there. So I'm just going to have to mention to the customer he's going to have to buy a whole new caliper. And these things just happen in the rust belt. The only way really to prevent this is to have, if you own a car like my own specific Toyota Tacoma, I service them every year so that everything stays nice and free. But this caliper I want to show you, it's very rusty. The rust is really, really heavy on this thing. The rest of the vehicle is not that bad. For some reason, it looks like this probably sat out in front of a dealership for a while, and this side was exposed more to the road, and this side rusted a lot more than the passenger side. And usually I'd say the passenger side would rust more on the road because it hits a lot more. The inner side of the road is actually cleaner than the outer side of the road, so I wouldn't say that's the case. But anyway, that's a little bonus on the video. So I'm going to get everything cleaned up, and I'll have to remove the e-brake cable, and also I'll have to take the brake hose off. So taking the brake hose off, we're going to open the system, so it'll have to be bled, and it just turns into a little more work. It's not a big deal. I just wanted to show you what happens when things do happen. Thanks for watching.